Welcome to the Solo Promoter Podcast, the show that is one guy talking about tabletop pro wrestling and fighting games, including Filsinger Games, Legends of Wrestling, Champions of the Galaxy, Go Fight Pow, and more. Welcome to the show. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is episode number 95. Before we get going, I want to send out a special thank you to all the members of the Golden Circle. These are the folks who've gone to solopromoter.com and clicked the join button and support the channel with a monthly donation and help keep this channel going. So a big shout out to all of them. Golden Circle channel members get exclusive bonus videos that are not available anywhere else. They also get to see a video of the live recording of these podcast episodes. So if you want to check that out, head on over to solopromoter.com on your desktop and click join. Well, to start off, I'll give some updates on what's going on my tabletop, and actually, there are no updates from last episode, basically because due to travel and due to some shows that I've had, I have not been able to play. So there's no real updates there. I'm itching to get back to it. I did do some FG assistant gaming for my Outlaw Championship Wrestling, which you can find at solopromoter.com. That is my bootleg fed. I did do a thing for that, and the Steiner brothers made their debut. That's all I'll say, so you can go watch the video and see what happens. But other than that, there's been no real other gaming stuff going on, just because, as I said, I've had a lot of shows and I've had a lot of travel. Also, I don't know if I said this, but back when I was talking about my trip to Galacticon and getting to Galacticon and all that kind of stuff, I talked about an audition I had, and I'm happy to say that I did get cast in that audition. I don't think I can 100% say what it is yet, but as we get closer to the time, I will be able to do that, and you will be able to hear what it is. But let's get to the main topic. I'm so excited about this episode. You know, when I decided to bring this podcast back and to change it from the Filsinger Games fan podcast and make it a little bit more general, I was trying to think of a different angle, because one of the reasons I stopped the Filsinger Games fan podcast was because at the time, there was Roll Up, the official podcast. There was Uncharted Territory, the granddaddy of all the Filsinger Games podcasts. And then there was my podcast. And I just kind of felt that you were getting listeners, you, the amazing listeners, were getting the same information on all three things. We would all talk about the new releases. We would all talk about whatever was hip and happening in the world of Filsinger Games. And I wanted to do something. And that's kind of why I stopped. Part of the reason why I stopped the podcast. And when I started to back up again, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll talk about new releases, but I want to find some angle to make it different. So that's what I've tried. And you've maybe seen a little bit of that in, like, last episode I talked about earning your shot and bringing wrestlers in to earn their shot. And we've talked about other things like that. More about the kind of crunchy stuff about playing, and that stuff that can kind of be applied to many different games, not just Filsinger Games. Well, then I struck on this idea of, as you know, we are the Solo Promoter Podcast, and so usually it is just me, but it's like, well, what if I interview other promoters, not about their feds and the history of their different federations or wrestling games, but about how they play, about how they do their booking, about how they do their rankings, about how they do their posting or writing down their results. And I really liked this idea, and that is what we've done. So today, I am super excited to welcome our first guest to the podcast for this sort of new series. And it is none other than Cory Olson from the Uncharted Territory Podcast. Now, I know you know who Cory is, but just in case you don't, he is on part of the Legends team that develops the cards for Filsinger Games Legends of Wrestling line. He has been a longtime Champions of the Galaxy player. He has been a longtime Filsinger Games fan. And he has a Fed on the official Filsinger Games message board, his USWA Fed, which is amazing. And I say that in this interview. I fawn over it. His Fed is an inspiration. So I was super excited to sit down with Cory to talk to him about the nuts and bolts of how he gets this Fed done. Now, I will say that the original idea for this whole thing was to just do audio interviews. And that was going to be the thing. Now, we recorded over Zoom. And when you record over Zoom, it does record the video. And I talked to Cory, and Cory is totally cool with the entire video being shared with the Golden Circle channel members. So Golden Circle channel members, you will be able to watch that. But there was one moment in the interview where Cory shared his screen to give us a peek at the spreadsheet he uses to track results. Well, talking to Cory, I am going to clip that part out, and it will be available as its own video at solopromoter.com. So if you want to check that out, you'll be able to see that at solopromoter.com. You'll be able to get a good close-up look of his spreadsheet, and you'll be able to even pause it to see how he kind of lays things out. He also has a win-loss column in there, and it's really unique. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it about where he got it from, where he developed it, but it's very cool, and it was very neat for Cory to share that. So without any further ado, let's head over to my interview with the one, the only, Cory Olson. Well, it is my pleasure right now to welcome to the Solo Promoter Podcast the, in my opinion, true star of Uncharted Territory, the one and only Cory Olson. Cory, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grant. Great to be here, and I'm sure we're going to get some feedback about that comment, but I appreciate your compliments.
Well, my favorite is whoever I'm talking to at the moment, so we'll just say that.
That works.
Well, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a different interview, and I explained this to you before I reached out. More, you on Uncharted Territory, which, I mean, if people are listening to this and they're not listening to Uncharted Territory, just delete your computer right now. But you talk about your booking and you talk about your feds and you give about your fed results, but I wanted to get more into the nuts and bolts, because that's what I always love. Is I love the tools. I love what kind of notebook do you use, or what kind of all that kind of information. So that's hoping what we can get into here. Sure. And I know you've run a couple different feds, but I figure we would keep this primarily to your USWA fed, because that is your main fed, your longest running fed. Can you give us a little bit of a brief overview of that fed and how long you've been playing it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started it in 2004. So about 2 years or so after the Legends line really got going. I took my time in getting it going. I just kind of wanted to have kind of a plan in place. At the time I was playing 2 Champions of the Galaxy's feds, a GWF and a CPC. And for whatever reason, I felt more, protective of the Legends cards, and I didn't want to rush into anything and then kind of regret later. Not that really happened with the Champions feds, but I don't know, for whatever reason, being it involved real life people, I was just a little more protective of it. And so I kind of took my time. I did some research when I decided I wanted to do a single territory rather than, kind of a nationwide fed or a global fed. I did not grow up watching the USWA. I was very aware of it in the Memphis territory through the magazines and different sources. But I wanted to, kind of have an idea, where did they run? What were the towns, the cities, the arenas? And so I went to the Kayfabe Memories website, which is still running today. They've got a good discussion board. I don't know if the website's been updated in a while, but their discussion board is still pretty active. And I just kind of asked, where did they run, and kind of got an overview of that. So I kind of set up my schedule. I kind of went with 3 cards in a game month as my plan, and that's pretty much what I still do today. I've been running it since 2004. And initially I ran it pretty much the same time frame. So if it was January 2004, that's when my cards were taking place. But over time, just due to real life obligations and other things, kind of slowed it down. I didn't want to stop or do a restart or anything like that. I loved the history that I had already made by that point. So I just thought, well, I don't have to keep up with real time. I'm just going to keep the story of this fed going and just play it as I'm able to. And so my game year right now, I'm in July of 2019. Even though we're in 2024, that's just where I am. That's just the pace I've kind of kept up. I would say the last year or two, I've been able to play a little more frequently due to COTG Online. That's been a great tool and a great resource. I miss pulling out the physical cards and playing and rolling the dice, but online saves me a lot of time. And I love how it works and everything. So yeah, that's been my longest running fed. I've recently started an indie fed for IPW, Impact Pro Wrestling, that is in the same universe and the storyline as the USWA, and they're kind of an affiliated fed. And I started that, and I'm trying to play them where they line up as far as the time and everything, so I don't get too far ahead of one or the other. So far I haven't done much as far as like talent swapping, but I know down the line there'll be a little bit of that, and I don't want to. I'm really picky about not having any kind of timeline contradictions or anything. So I'm trying to play those in order, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And
Mhm.
you mentioned that you mostly are playing online, but do you
Yeah.
still bring out the cards and play it that way, or is it mostly
Yeah.
online these days?
Yeah, I would say definitely I'm kind of a purist when it comes to my super cards. So for the USWA, I have three annual super cards. Those I'll wait even if I have to, wait a couple of weeks and just find a time where I can physically bring out the cards and everything. I'll hold off and roll the cards and dice for that. Or like milestone cards, like say every 100 cards. Or just times like when I have longer breaks over Christmas, things like that. I might just say, okay, I've got some time on this day. I'm gonna pull out the cards and play this card, the old-fashioned way. But for my IPW, I've done one card with cards and dice, and that was when I crowned the first IPW heavyweight champion. I really wanted to roll that one out by hand, and so it's kind of select special cards like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a dedicated time that you try to play? I mean, I know you're busy, you have family and your job and all that other stuff, but do
Mhm.
you try to like, oh, every Sunday or something, I'm going to play, or do you just kind of play when you can, when you find a moment?
Yeah, kind of when I have a moment, and I might build a whole card, especially in the online system. I'll set up, here's my latest USWA card. And if I have 20 minutes, maybe I'll just play one match out of that card, just as like a break
Hmm.
from I'm a teacher for those that don't know, and I'll take a break from my correcting and lesson planning and roll a match. And and just kind of do it that way. So it may take me several days to complete one card. Um, but yeah, I kind of play it when I can. And if there are times like my wife maybe goes out with friends one night, oh, that's a good time to roll some matches. So no, I don't have a dedicated day, just kind of whenever I'm able to do it.
I think that's a good lesson too, because I don't know. I think we get in our head like I know I do sometimes of like, oh, I got to play out this whole card. If I sit down,
Yeah,
I got to play out this whole card. But
yeah,
you don't have to. And I think I really learned that from when Zeke was, and I think he's still going,
yeah,
Mr. Vegas, going
yeah.
on with his playing every single day. But like sometimes he plays four matches, and I was like, oh
Right.
yeah, you can just play four matches, and that's
Yeah.
great.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say when I was younger, teenager playing the game, I definitely felt, oh, I booked this card, I got to play it out. But then, you start to get more obligations in life and real life sets in and you realize, okay, you don't have to stress about it that much. Just play it
Yeah.
as you're able.
Well, and I find myself too, I don't know if you're the same way, but it's when you're not playing, you're kind of thinking about it. So it
Hmm.
almost makes like a deeper history because you're like, oh, when I
Yeah,
get back to it, I can add this to it.
right.
Whereas something in the moment, maybe you wouldn't have thought of that idea.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do that quite a bit as I kind of write up the recaps for like the discussion board especially. Um I'm kind of adding in little things after the fact, just not changing finishes or anything, but just little things to the storyline of the feud that just add a little depth to
Yeah. Now, I've heard some promoters say that while they're playing, they have music playing or they're watching
it.
classic or modern wrestling. Do you have anything going on when you're playing, or are you just usually playing?
Usually I might have like a show on and or a movie, especially one that I've seen a few times where I don't have to focus so much on that, but just to have some background noise. Otherwise I might put on wrestling,
Hmm.
especially matches I've seen before, maybe like an old WrestleMania or Starcade, just again as to kind of set the mood and the ambience.
Yeah.
But yeah, so often we'll have something on.
Now you mentioned that you use real dates to kind of track your history. And you said you're in 2019. When we get into 2020, are you going to bring COVID into it, the pandemic? Like, do you bring in real world events, or do you just kind of keep it just as a tracking thing?
More as a tracking thing so far. And that's I'm really toying with that with what to do in the next game year, 2020. I've kind of gone back and forth. Part of me is like, well, I could just jump ahead to 2021 and say everything shuts down. But again, since, for one thing, when I was playing Champions of the Galaxy, I was like, okay, I want to get through these sets. I want to get caught up because I started years after the game came out, and I was aware of all the new products, especially, knowing Chad and Tim and everybody. And I was getting the promoter newsletter. So I was aware of all the current product, but I was about 10 or 12 sets behind that. So I would kind of rush through those game years to get caught up to the current product. Well, with Legends, you don't really have that, the storyline. It's the new sets, but you're bringing in whomever you want, whenever you want, and using them in whatever way. Um, so I don't know. For now, I'm thinking it's just going to be another year. I'm not going to do anything special, but when we get there, we'll see. I may incorporate real time events. Once in a while, I'll incorporate like, real celebrities outside of wrestling. For my IPW, for example, I acknowledge some of these, a lot of these are Midwestern wrestlers, and I said some of them wrestled in First Wrestling, which for those who don't know is a Minneapolis-based promotion, and it's run out of First Avenue, the nightclub. And in writing that up, I said that the club is owned by Prince, making it sound like Prince is still alive.
Got
So,
it. Yeah.
it's kind of an alternate universe, so to speak, where it's with real people, but they may have not crossed paths in real life.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea of this is a little bit more Champions of the Galaxy, but I always kind of like the idea. We talk about all the time about multiverse and about
Yeah.
alternate realities. It's like everybody's fed is like a multiverse,
Yes.
and so
Right.
that can work with Legends too.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How far out are you planning your matches? Like, are you booked? Whatever card you're on now, do you have the next card booked, or how do you sort of do that?
Typically I try to have at least the top two or three matches scheduled about 3 or 4 cards out. So I have an Excel spreadsheet that Tim Dalton actually put together years ago, and I've been using it since I think around 2009 is when I first started using it. And I just make a new one every game year. But it lays out the cards. I schedule all the cards for the year as far as, where they're going to be, which arenas, which dates. And especially for milestone events like 50th or 100th cards, I like to know when those are going to take place. And then I try to go about, like I say, about 3 or 4 cards ahead of schedule, at least for the top couple matches. Now, injuries or upsets or title changes can always shuffle things up. But I like to have a little bit of a direction where I'm going for title matches and feud matches, especially. And as always, it's card subject to change, but I do try to have a little bit of a plan. I like doing that, and it's with some of the game cards like the announcer cards and commissioner cards where you have an impromptu match breakout on a card that throws me off. I mean, I have trouble incorporating those. Not that I never do, but it's hard for me to use those because I do like to, have the whole card, the whole show planned out.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I use the primetime wrestling card, if
Yeah.
I'm going to use this for this event,
Yeah.
but I'm going to schedule one less match because it does have that
Yeah.
result where it's like, oh,
Right.
you can suddenly get an impromptu match.
Right. Yeah. For me, having Lance Russell officially in the game is awesome. He's always been a part of my USWA storytelling. But I don't know if I'll ever actually use the card, just because, again, it would throw things off in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. In your opinion, what is the ideal roster size? Like, what size do you like to work with?
Yeah, and I go back and forth on that a lot. I think I didn't look before we started, but I think with my USWA right now, I'm probably at about, I would say, counting all, active wrestlers, including kind of some enhancement talent and people that might not get used as much. I'm probably about 40 to 50, I would guess. And I know with my IPW, I wanted to keep it a little bit lower, about 30 to 40. But again, some of those may be people, a manager with wrestling stats. He's not going to get used as a wrestler very often. The enhancement talent, people like the Mulkeys, SD Jones, they'll get worked in the cards, but obviously their role is to put over the other talent,
Right.
Which doesn't always happen, of course, with the dice. But they may only get a match once a month or maybe even less than that, kind of depending on how many other if we want to call them superstar matches or feud matches are going to be on a card. I was looking and Hillbilly Jim and Cousin Luke are still on my roster. And I looked at my previous cards and, oh, I haven't used them for a couple of shows here. So I'll try to, maybe squeeze them in either as enhancement talent, basically, or maybe against another team like, we'll say Danny Doring and Roadkill as the opening match. And one of those teams will get a win. So we just add something to their record. But then eventually too, I kind of look as I want to bring in new guys. I'm realizing, oh, I haven't cycled people out for a while or written people out of the storylines. Even if I still like them, I kind of look, okay, how have they been doing the last few months? Is this a good time for them to leave, go to another territory? It's hard sometimes. I'm at a point right now in my USWA where there's more new names I want to bring in, but there's a lot of names I've liked having around. And so it's kind of I got to make some tough decisions here with the roster size, not get too big and make sure it's, staying fresh.
Yeah. Well, that was actually my next question is like, how long do you wait to bring someone in? If there's somebody that you're just super excited to use, do you bring them in right away?
A lot of people, there's a lot of names I've gotten asked about, like Randy Savage. Like I have not brought in Randy Savage, and he's one of my all-time favorites. Now with Bruno getting a card, Bruno Sammartino, that's another big name I want to use. But part of me too, as I kind of said earlier, it's kind of I'm protective of those names, and I don't want to rush into bringing them in and risk them losing or things like that. So I do kind of want to build those guys up a little bit. Savage, like at the time, a few times in the past, I've thought of an idea and then just kind of based on how other things were going in the Fed, I thought, no, this wouldn't make a lot of sense to bring him in now. It'd just be kind of bringing him in for bringing him in. And I don't want to do that. I don't, like I said, I want to make it mean something for some of these names that I really like. So as far as like when we get new Legends cards, once in a while I'll bring in a new name quickly, but often I want to kind of wait and just see how everything else shakes down in the Fed and when a good time would be to bring that card into the game.
Now, when you bring somebody like a Randy Savage or Bruno Sammartino in, somebody of that level, like really big name, do they get title shots right away, or do they have to work their way up in your Fed?
I'll make them. In most cases, they work their way up. Now Bruno, a name like Bruno, he may get a lot of quote unquote easier opponents to try to pad his record a little bit. The Johnny Rodses, Larry Sharps, get some wins like that. And then, obviously I'll have him take on tougher guys before, if I'm kind of building to a title match, I will give him some more credible names too, and hope that he wins. But again, the dice can change things. I recently kind of did that with Tommy Rich. I brought him into my USWA Fed, and I'd never used him before, but I portrayed him as this big star coming off of national TV, Georgia Championship Wrestling, much like his real career. And so he was a name that people knew. And I built him up for about 9 game months toward the shot at the title at the end of the year. He lost one match along the way, and it was kind of a random I figured it would be a competitive match, but it was a lot more one-sided than I thought. And that was with Ivan Koloff and his first color card, kind of the 80s Ivan Koloff. And Koloff beat him. And I'd already announced that Rich was getting the title shot. This was about 2 cards before the end of the year super card. And so I kind of, he did use the chain at one point in the match. And I just said there was a lot of, attacks and shenanigans going on. So Rich would still get the title shot. And then they would do a rematch, after Rich won the title, do a rematch for revenge. But yeah, something like that can happen and kind of throw off plans a little bit. But I still felt with his overall record, I felt safe giving him the title shot. I wasn't going to change the end of the year supercard main event on like 2 weeks notice. And
right. How do you track your results? Is it, do you use paper or the Excel spreadsheet or the online or all a combination of those?
I'm kind of have like several, I think of it as like several forms of backup in case one of the systems, crashes or disappears. I do keep notebooks just because out of tradition of always having had notebooks for Champions of the Galaxy. I sometimes update those after the fact, after playing, especially if I'm doing online and I don't have the notebook with me, I'll keep the results in the online system, but then my official tracker is the Excel spreadsheet. I have I don't know if I can share my screen. So this is my 2019 USWA, and again, if you follow me on the discussion board, I'm way ahead playing where I'm posting right now. And again, Tim Dalton made this format originally with the card layout and the matches and everything. But I'll just go, I'll go, here is my super card for Independence Day Bash. I'll lay the cards out like this, and put in the matches, and then afterward I'll underline the winner. I'll make notes like over here, Tommy Rich got injured after this match, so I'll put how many cards he got injured. I'll put like a little Excel note there where it kind of says what happened if there's an angle or something. Any other notes like the Patriot, excuse me, Del Wilkes got the title shot in the main event, and in being the 4th of July, I gave him the hometown advantage rule. That's something I do every year for the super card. And then there's separate tabs down below here where I keep records of win losses and draws. I'll do kind of an overall record and then simply pin or submission. I do the same for tag teams as well. So that's I kind of use this as my official database, I would say, of tracking everything. But then I've also got the written ones just in case I lose the spreadsheet somehow, and if I lose the notebook, then I've got an online. So I have a couple different places where I've at least got some form of the results.
And does that spreadsheet also, like that win-loss tracking page and stuff, does that help you do your rankings as well?
Yeah, I don't keep any kind of official rankings when it comes to title shots. I'll definitely look at the overall win-loss record, and sometimes more recent win streaks. Say a guy goes on a 4-match winning streak, and maybe his record's so, but he's compiled some wins recently. Oh, I'll give him a shot at one of the secondary singles titles. Often with the title matches, I kind of have depending who's holding the title, I might have a plan of like, oh, I want these two feuding guys to wrestle for the title in 2 months. And so then I might have the challenger try to get some more guaranteed wins, which of course we know aren't guarantees. But if it's possible, I try to build up to that. They're feuding, and then they're also going to have a title match. And it doesn't always work out that way. But I do look at those percentages to kind of get an overall idea. Like if I'm running out of ideas for the challengers, maybe there's somebody kind of in the undercard, mid card that's been getting some wins that I've kind of overlooked, and I can look at those percentages and say, oh, this would make sense for so and so to get a title shot in 2 cards.
Excellent. And how many titles do you have in your Fed?
In the USWA currently, I have 4. So I have the world heavyweight title. The USWA in the later years, when Jerry Jarrett kind of combined Dallas and Memphis for a while, they called it the unified champ, which was supposed to be the AWA and the world class titles that Jerry Lawler won, and then of course that kind of fell apart, but it was kind of based on that lineage. And then they kept it as the unified title, I think pretty much through their time in the 90s. And so I do print out paper belts, and that's the belt I use for my world champ. And then I've got the world tag team titles. The belts I use are the ones I used in Memphis in about the late 80s. It says AWA Southern on them, but those are the belt models that I use. And then of course the Southern Heavyweight Champ is my second singles title, which gets its own main event most of the time. I kind of cycle through the title defenses. In a game month, it'll usually go world title, and then the next card tag team, and then Southern on the third card. So I try to present it in a way where, yes, the world title is still the top belt, but the Southern champ is not far behind. It's a huge prize to hold that title. And then I've also got the Mid-America title, which was a title that was pretty frequently part of the Memphis territory in the 80s, even going back to the 70s too. For that one, I tend to use guys who maybe won't be your main eventers. Maybe they're good tag team wrestlers, and they're decent in singles, but they're not gonna get a lot of wins in singles. I don't want to say lower card guys, although often that is the challengers. Right now, my champion is Jackie Fargo, and he's probably about the toughest card I would use in that Mid America championship picture. And that title I'll put on as kind of the semi-main event to one of the other title matches. I what I've started doing is I have my kind of my six main cities in the territory, which are Memphis, Nashville, Louisville, Lexington, Evansville, and Knoxville. And so the Mid-America title will be defended in other cities. Kind of those they would call them spot shows back in the day, as like a title that would be for those less visited towns.
Yeah. That Jackie Fargo card is surprisingly tough. You know, like it's
Yeah.
deceptively tough. And
Yeah.
in the online version I play, Hollywood Elite Wrestling, he was a champ and he held it
Yeah.
for a long time, beating a lot of people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's surprised me as well. He's lost once by pin. He's had some DQ and countouts, but been his only loss, was one pinfall loss, and he's had a good reign so far with the Mid America title.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I kind of want to wrap up by talking about your post where you post your results on the Filsinger Games message board, because to me, they're very inspirational.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you.
I love reading through them. Maybe I don't always comment, but I always do read when you post.
Thank you.
And you kind of do this thing where you post your results, and but then you also post like kind of a highlights post shortly after that. Can you tell us about those highlight posts and how you come up with, because they're very different from what the result posts are?
Sure. Yeah, I was kind of encouraged to post. I think it was 2006 was the first time I posted on the original discussion board, and I need to find those and kind of save them because I wasn't thinking ahead. I should have saved them. But I knew that, I wasn't really doing like a studio wrestling show. I kind of pictured things as more the house shows, arena shows, whatever you want to call them. But I saw it as, kind of an older school feel where what the fans are going to see is the wrestling. I mean, yeah, somebody might cut a promo after a match, or there might be some announcement, but a lot of those, the big announcements, the interviews would be on TV the week after the show, the house show. And so I wanted to do something where that would be incorporated. How are fans finding out about the next main event, or somebody gets injured, or there's a suspension? How are they finding that out? So kind of in between those house shows, I just said, okay, there's their weekly championship wrestling show on TV. Lance Russell and Dave Brown are the hosts, and they'll show highlights maybe of the matches that took place, but then it's mainly an interview and news updates, and that's kind of the format of the show. I kind of think of it as like a ECW in the 90s, their early TV show. A lot of times they acknowledged these matches took place this last Saturday night in Philly. We're going to show you, the highlights of this title match, or here's what happened when so and so showed up, and so in that sense, that's kind of the similarity there. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to have some way of doing or telling the story of what happens in between the actual matches. And so I just kind of wrote that up, and it also helps me with my long-term planning, like you were asking about, like, okay, 2 weeks before this match takes place, it's going to get announced on TV by Lance Russell. So those bigger matches, those title matches, big feud matches, fans are going to find out about it ahead of time, and it'll be built up on TV, or something will happen on the shows in between. So-and-so gets a big win over this guy's ally, and to build up their feud match in a couple weeks in Memphis. I wanted, like I said, I wanted to have some way to tell that story, instead of, saying that every time at the arena, there's a big announcement after every match. I didn't want it to be too much like, sorry to say, current TV wrestling, where there's long promos in front of the fans, but more, this is happening on TV, and you tune in to find out the latest.
Yeah. And like you just mentioned, somebody gets a win over their ally to continue the feud. Is there any gameplay involved in those highlight things, or do you just say that's what happened?
I just kind of say I just kind of say that's what happened. The only thing I can think of would be, say there's like a feud table injury after a match at the last show, and I roll suspension on the commissioner's card or whatever chart I'm using. That I will roll it as I'm playing through that house show, but then I say that that doesn't get announced until the TV show. So that's about the most where those kind of non-wrestling cards get incorporated is on the TV show once in a while. You know, I'm not going to say that in the arena somebody gets injured and then the commissioner comes out in front of the fans and makes the announcement that, oh, you're suspended. No, the fans have to tune into the TV show, you know, a few days later to see what the decision is.
Yeah, I love
And
that. I love that.
yeah. So that's but most otherwise most of the TV recap is just you know, coming up with it on my own.
Well, your results are really detailed. I love it. Do you keep track of like the moves that while you're playing, or is that like an online thing because online tracks the moves, or how do you do that?
For whether I'm, you know, playing with the cards or online, I do keep track. I think I posted this when I started doing my 2019 results. COTG Online, I had gotten behind in writing up those recaps, but I thought, well, there's the log, the match log or whatever it's called. There must have been kind of a crash at some point because I lost some of those move by move things. So some of my matches for 2019 aren't going to be as detailed, but I'm trying to catch up here and get what is still saved in the system. If I'm rolling with cards and dice, I'll make notes, either pen and paper or like do a notepad document on my computer and just type in, you know, here's how every fatigue token happened, or any kind of special circumstances a manager uses as distractor rating. I make note of that so that I remember not to roll it again later in the match. You know, or like any other, if there's a hurt referee situation, I make note of that, like how many moves it's going to be, and then kind of build that into the storyline of the match, depending on what happens when the referee's out. But yeah, I do. I've even before playing online, I would do that just to kind of give that storytelling aspect of like, okay, this guy worked on the guy's leg and went for his figure four several times throughout the match, and it didn't work. But his opponent's leg was hurting, and it was just little things like that where I do what the dice came up with, but it kind of add some story to it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to wrap up. This is actually a question I meant to ask earlier, but
Sure.
I'll ask it now. Do you use bootlegs in your Fed?
Good question. Overall, I don't. Not in my Legends Fed. In Champions of the Galaxy, I did quite a bit more in the CPC. I kind of saw the CPC as like an ECW of the 90s, where the wrestlers who couldn't get a break on WWF or WCW on the national platform would kind of try to get some recognition there. So I would use Mark's official CPC characters, but then also a lot of bootlegs. We did a lot of bootlegs back then with the NGO characters, and you know, I wanted to use our own guys somewhere. For Legends and for IPW, I usually don't. If I do, it's usually a match from another territory that's brought in as a special attraction. So it's two bootlegs against each other. There have been a few exceptions over the years, but as of right now, I don't. I really like the challenge of, okay, you only have these guys to use, like talking about official cards. These are your possibilities. It's kind of like a draft or something like that. What can you do with them? You know, and especially since we've started doing the color sets, Mike Molesky and I were talking about this in Waterloo. We have had so many new names and big names signed that weren't in black and white that I mean, it's hard to narrow it down. Like, you know, there's just so many choices from official cards now. You know, years ago, I kind of thought, well, maybe one day I will need to incorporate bootlegs just for variety's sake, but I haven't had to, and I hope we can continue adding names and that I won't have to. And nothing against bootlegs. I mean, I've helped with some bootleg projects and there's some great ones out there, but I just like that challenge of, you know, you're only able to have these guys. What can you do with them?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well,
Thank you.
Cory, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today and sharing geeking. I love just like halfway through this, I was like, man, we're two older guys talking about like this tabletop game, but I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think the listeners will too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Many thanks to Cory Olson for being on the show and being the inaugural guest for this. I don't know what we're going to call this segment, maybe the promoter toolbox. But again, thank you to Cory. For links to Cory's Fed, for links to Uncharted Territory, for links to all things Cory, check out the show notes for this episode. Again, this is episode number 95 to find out more. And be sure to check out that video where Cory shows off his spreadsheet, because it was pretty great. It's a pretty great moment. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Solo Promoter Podcast. If you have a topic you'd like the show to cover, leave it in the comments. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to this. You can check out my personal Filsinger Games feds at gwfpromoter.com and lowpromoter.com. The theme song is American Guy by Throwing Toasters, used by permission and available on Apple Music, Spotify, and anywhere you get your music. This podcast is not affiliated in any way with any gaming company or their subsidiaries. It's purely for entertainment purposes only. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you soon. This episode is copyright 2024 Saturday Morning Media, Grandpa Choco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.